somebody I went to high school with and junior high, actually. He went to MU.
Yeah, for a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Matt Contreras in here. Just
good to be on, man.
Yeah, thanks for being on. Happy to have you. Kind of like we were talking about, you're giving me some pointers here on some things look out for or even look into for podcasting.
I've been in the like the industry, like marketing and media industry for like the last 15 years. So started with like graphic design and stuff like that. So and then I had my own business for about 5 years, and you just can't, it's too expensive to bring in outside people, right, to learn to like do your marketing for you and things like that. So kind of learned it out of necessity.
So yeah, it's kind of one of those things I've thought about, even because it's like I just bought like some magnets for like my car and stuff, and some stickers, like small things I can possibly like hand out even at work. Like, hey, here's a sticker, and it has all my stuff on the bottom, like my Spotify, YouTube, all that jazz.
Right.
So it's like that's one way I can start doing it, because like I've noticed, I think you even mentioned it on something I'd watched with you before, or you posted it. Like you're just saying too, finding somebody that can help you do that stuff and actually be 100% dedicated as much as you are is always a problem. So it's like one of those things, like, okay, and maybe I can find somebody from in college that's super
Maybe I
could do that, but then are they really going to care about it? It's not resume builder. Hey, I'm help this guy start up a podcast. So like
it's so tough, man. I've started 3 podcasts which have all failed. I think the longest one I had was maybe 6 months, maybe up to like 15-20 podcasts that were made. And it's really tough because it's a commitment. It's a really low ROI, unless it's like very relevant and you have some people that can capture those audiences, but it's so tough. But like I love it. I think it's such a great space for getting content out to people and helping people. And so I wish like I could find people to do it with, but it's so hard to coordinate a time. And then you have, like I said, all the equipment and stuff. Somebody has to produce it and then market it. And yeah, man. So, claps to you, because it's not easy keeping these going. And, if you do, eventually it'll get easier, but it's tough.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've ran into so far is like I've reached out to a number of people like yourself, and who are like, yeah, I'm down to jump on, but I've had like maybe 5 other people like after John and yourself from the first one, and it's like, damn, after that I'm gonna have to really start looking for some people, because right now I'm kind of just picking people I know that I know are kind of have cool things going on,
Sure.
and make it a little interesting and be a good start. But it's like, damn, after that,
So is this a new podcast that you're doing, or is this a continuum of your old one?
Yeah, it's a new one. I know the old one, I feel like we actually started off really good.
Yeah.
We had, I think, like 400 something views just off the first 2. So I was like, hey, this isn't bad, I was like, this is going pretty well. I think we're a pretty targeted audience too. It's like going like the veteran route, maybe some BS thrown in there as well.
Sure.
But that kind of, I mean, like you said, keeping it going, finding time, especially when you're in 2 different states and time differences and stuff like that, makes it a little bit more difficult. Then we both got kids, so
you got the family, you got friends, you're trying to keep your life together.
Yeah,
your wife is like, why are you in front of a camera and microphones all the time? We don't have no money. What's going on?
That's how I felt bad last time. I was like, man, talking with John, I was like, man, this thing's going like 2 hours. I can hear my son crying a little bit. He'd come in the room, I'm like, oh damn, I don't know how this is gonna work. But this time around, I'm definitely more I think I was always dedicated. It's just one of those things I've always wanted to do, because like you said, even if it doesn't take off and become anything spectacular, it's kind of cool to just catch up with people.
Right. Yeah.
Like, especially from like where we grew up in Houston, it's a small town. So now like you're doing these crazy things. You got like all these degrees, you've had businesses, you're you know, entrepreneurship is like huge with you. And like, I just think, and coming from Houston, not a lot of people get out of Houston. It's easy to get trapped.
Yeah, well, Houston's, it's
Now.
funny. It's funny because I'm in home loans and real estate now, right?
Mhm.
And so because I grew up there for so long and I still have friends and family there, I still get some business out there.
Oh wow.
And I had a person who really, they're like, only place I want to live is Houston. That's it. That's where I want to live. And they're like, I need to find a house here. Here's my price range, things like that. And the average, now keep in mind, right, the median and average, it's been a long time since we were in Houston High learning about averages and means, but the median and the average are different, but the average income there is $94,000 in Houston, and it far surpasses the income of any other city that's out there, right? And when we went there, there were about 2,000 people that lived in that town, and now there's about 6,000. They have a new development going out there. I believe it's targeted to kind of lower income, but it's a nicer development that's going out there, and it's supposed to be substantial. And so it's funny because you're right? It's a small town. We grew up in a country town, but then it's also like people really want to live there because it's secluded, so it's a little more safe. It still has that very like country home, say hi to your neighbor feeling to it, and that's all super cool. But it's funny, people pay a premium to be there now, right?
Yeah, which is crazy because I mean, yeah, growing up there never felt like it was a premium place to live. I guess that's why even my parents had moved out there from Modesto, which isn't a crazy city, but
Right.
from residential to like having property.
Right.
To, man,
A little more
don't
urban.
really, yeah, everybody's waving
rural,
at each other.
yeah.
Yeah, everybody's waving at each other when they drive by. There's guys on tractors driving down the street.
Right.
There is kind of like that sense of comfort, you know, like, oh, I can trust my kids walking to school.
Right. Yeah. It was nice. I used to walk to and from school, and I used to run on the canal, and never like any sort of worry at all. And now it's funny, like living in the age that we live in, my wife is super into murder documentaries, and so we've been watching all of these ones and all of these serial killers that come through California. And I'm just like, you don't even, that sort of like idea of crime and things like that never even occurred to me when we were in Houston, just because that's how it is, right? It's just so kind of friendly out there.
And there is something to it too. Like my parents still live up there in Northern California, and it's like I go home for a couple days, even if it's just a weekend. It is nice. I can't like, I mean, living in Southern California where it's just constant traffic. Like you can't, everywhere you go is on the freeway. So there's some of those back roads, those 2-lane or 1-lane roads, the grocery store where, my dad knows the freaking cashier and at the deli shop. Everybody's waving like, hey, how you doing? It's like there's
I have to like readjust my life when I go there, because you're driving through these country roads and you forget that like there's a speed limit, but there's not really a speed limit. And the people that live there do not like you driving slow in those roads. And I'm like, oh yeah, I need to speed up. I need to like understand what's going on here. And but it's so beautiful, right? Right now, probably the the almond blossoms are coming through, and it's just such a nice place to be. But it's just so funny that it's like people are paying a premium to be there instead of like somewhere like Ceres or Turlock or Modesto.
Yeah, it's crazy because even down here, some of the rural areas that we have in Southern California, like Hemet, they're doing a lot of developments and stuff. And we're just driving up from a friend's wedding this past weekend, and one side of the freeway, or it's like a 2-lane freeway or highway, there's new developments, and the other side there's dairy farms. There's a cow piled up high. I'm like, man, do these people know they're moving here? They're probably from LA buying these for like $200,000-$300,000.
Yeah.
No, you gotta get used to it. I mean,
it takes time, right? I mean, we have that out there. We have that there, and it takes because we drive from Sac. That's where we live, in Sac, and we drive down to the Central Valley. And there's a small parts, and typically I think when we drive through Lodi, where you will start to smell cows. And she's like, "What is that?" Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, "That's just nature. That's just life working. It's that's just how it is out here."
Yeah, there's even we got married. My wife and I got married up at her dad's house in Calaveras, and like the most country thing I think I've ever seen. That was the morning of. So me and my buddies were all eating down there at some restaurant. And this guy rode up on a horse to the gas station, tied the horse. Like they even had the little stands and things where you can still tie. They're like, where the hell are we? I'm like, dude, this is freaking Northern California, bro. I was like, this is
that's amazing. Honestly, that's amazing, dude. So
I was like,
yeah, it's still a trip when we see. I don't know in SoCal if you guys have this at all, but there's still a part of the police force here in Sacramento that rides horses around downtown. And it's always so weird to see them. I'm like, what do you like? Why do you guys have this horse? I'm like, this is not effective a way to police crime here, but it's always cool to see.
Yeah, it's like, how long does it take you to get back to the state,
yeah,
you know?
Right, exactly. We got to load the horse up. We got to feed them. It's craziness, man. So, but yeah. So dude, what's the format? What do you want to talk about today?
I don't know. So I kind of want to talk about things that you're up to. I mean, you're like, I think we were messaging you about it before, and I was saying, I think there's a lot of, I think it was with you. There's a lot of stories about, you hear these famous people that have all these different drives and interests, and I mean, they talk about how they get there, but I think there's a lot of like folks like ourselves that have these goals and we're accomplishing these things. There's different levels of success. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be, make millions and millions of dollars, but kind of diving into like that mindset that it takes. Like as I'm starting off as well on my own podcast, you've said you've launched a few, you've had your own business for a number of years. So trying to get into that mindset, because there's the David Goggins of the world that we hear. Wake up every day and they're just gun ho.
Run 50 miles that day before lunch.
Oh yeah,
I love it. He's such an eccentric. I relate to him so much because that's how I was in high school, right? Just like with the way that I don't remember how you moved at some point in high school, right?
Yeah, I ended up moving at end of junior year.
Okay. So yeah, you kind of caught like the beginning of that phase, but I was just like super into bodybuilding. And so I was working out 5 hours a day, 11 times a week. I got I don't know if you know, the school gave me special dispensation to work out instead of do PE. So yeah, so one of our classmates she was an elite acro. It's like gymnastics with people, you do it together, and she got it. And so I was like, if you can get it, I know it's a thing. So I went and I told them, and I was like, hey, this is what I'm passionate about. This is what I want to do. And it took a little convincing because I think they were like, thought I was just trying to skip school. And, but I had it signed off by the gym when I would win. I used to wake up at 5 a.m., run there, work out before, through first period, and then shower and then go back after school.
Holy cow.
And so I love David Goggins because I like that mindset really resonates with me. But after I tore my meniscus my senior year in football, and then I wrestled and did Olympic lifting in college at Sac State, and I messed up my knee every year after that. And so that ability to be like Goggin is just out of my system now. It's just so impossible. I'm like, right now I'm just trying to be able to walk every day and not, be crippled. But yeah, no, and you're right, dude. It's funny because I had a similar idea like this for a podcast, and I was like, I'm super fascinated by the best, right? And I think everybody is, but I think a lot of people, when they think of the best, they think of people that are notoriably the best. Exactly. And there's so many, and you look at like the Guinness Book of Records, right? And look at how many people in there are like the best for the weirdest things, right? And that's so interesting to me. But you're right, there's all these people, and Houston's a good example of this. You have these Houston, as far as I know right now, is the #1 almond growing region in the country. They grow all the almonds, and I'm sure that there's somebody out there that owns a majority of that land, right? So in actual, probably the guy that owns Blue Diamond would be my guess. But so in actuality, he is probably one of the best or the best almond grower in the nation.
Exactly.
But I don't know his name. You don't know his name, right? But that's I think that's to your point, right? There's all these people that are successful in their own right, and it's such an interesting thing to be able to get with them, talk with them, and get these different perspectives on what success looks like.
Yeah, because I mean, it's easy to fall in trap, I think, or in love with the glamour story of a rags to riches type thing. But I mean, how relevant is some of that stuff? And like you were saying too, I mean, the guy that owns Blue Diamond, like nobody knows who he is. Nobody who owns a majority of things that we purchase. Nobody really knows these individuals. But even like at like a micro level, like one of the things I've been thinking about is I'm trying to get a little bit more healthier this like the last maybe 4 or 5 months or so, ever since my daughter was born. So yeah, around 6 months. I taking vitamins and doing like little things. And I used to get in this mindset where it's like, you know what, I just got to work out. So I'd work out for like 2 weeks. I'd feel good and I'd stop. And I won't do it for like another 3 or 4 months and I'd get back into it. So like I think I was telling my wife this, or a friend of mine, like the level of success to me right now is like, I know I'm going to get back in the gym eventually, but instead of just rushing gun ho with it, I think I've done it so many times. I'm trying to be more strategic. Let's start with the little steps first. You know, let's clean up the habit of what I'm eating, the diet, like beer wise, maybe cut back drinking a beer every day like I was doing. Let's you know, have it on the weekends. Because man, like it was getting to a point where it's like having a couple bombers a night. It's like, man, that's just a lot right there in itself. So let's eat a little healthier, get some vitamins in. You know, and then once I get back into the habit of working out, it's going to feel like it was a progression to get there. And so instead of just bum rushing it and not cleaning up anything else, so that's one of those levels of success I think that's out there that a lot of people think it just happens overnight. Also, a lot of little leg work. Everybody's different. Some people have it overnight. They hit something, they strike gold, but there's also those little steps that people I think overlook. If it's eating vitamins, eating foods, or if it's just, you know, today I was running 5 miles or 50 miles like Goggins. I'll wake up and walk a quarter mile today, and then the next day I'll do that for a week and then slowly progress, and all of a sudden you're freaking running marathon. So
well, I mean, Goggins has a good story too. I haven't dived into it super deep, but I've heard enough where, you know, I know he either failed out or did not pass SEAL school a couple times. You know, he was a bigger dude. Like, so I think a lot of like people, they see the end result and they forget that even Goggins is human, right? Even he had a journey to get there. And all of these guys, right? I mean, I'm a big fan of Joe Rogan. I'm a big fan of like Gary Vee. All of these guys, they tell their origin stories, and most people who make their wealth, right, that's not inherited, right? It's still a very small portion of our population. And so yeah, you're 100% right. And it's funny, we're at that age now where you're like, you mentally have to think about your health, right? And that's one of my new mantras, like health is wealth, right? And when you're in your 20s and you're grinding, you don't sleep for 4 days, it's not a big deal. Or, you know, you're hungover, and you know, all of that weightlifting and all of those sports. When you start to get into your 30s and your 40s, you're going to start to feel that, right? And you kind of have to start thinking about that. So I'm right there with you, dude. It's just like, you know, and especially if you're the type of people that I think you're trying to really attract to, is these people that are super gung-ho, that will put in the work. You sometimes forget to prioritize your health. And I went from one extreme to another, right? I went from a bunch of sports, very deep into bodybuilding, to like essentially kind of what you were doing. Like, I'm going to work out 2 months here, a month here, a couple of weeks here, and I'm going to focus on growing a business. And you do that, and that's all great and dandy. But then you get to the end of it and you're like, shit, like I might die tomorrow if I don't like stop eating and drinking and work out, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like
there's crazy.
Yeah, and like even like thinking of like a guy like Goggins or Rogan, and like especially with Goggins, I like you were saying, I relate to him a lot too. Maybe not fitness wise, but like mentality wise, I think especially when it comes to work, you know, it's like I've always had this mindset, never stop, like always continue to grow. I always seek mentorship. I think that's something a lot of, like I say, a lot of younger people, which is weird to say now, younger people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You see these kids, kids are like 18, 19, early 20s. And I get the mindset of trying to accomplish things on your own. That's important also. Like you need to have that self-drive. But mentorship is so huge. Even if it's somebody older, it could be somebody the same age, somebody younger, but like, so that mindset that he like has, where continue to grow, you know, never stay put or stagnant, no excuses. To like my work life every day. It's like, you know what? Every day I want to make sure every email's answered. I'm not going to leave an email unanswered. I want to make sure I return every phone call I miss. So when I go to bed at night, it's done. Like the work day's done. I'm not thinking about, oh man, I should have, you know, it's going to bog me down tomorrow because then I got to wake up extra early, answer that phone call or call a person. So like his mindset, and as well, like someone like Joe Rogan, who I like a lot too, there's a lot of different relatable aspects to them besides their fitness, obviously. I mean, they're grinders and just life in general. And like,
I think that's the key, honestly. Like if we're gonna sum up, I think in any of these podcasts, if you were like to be like, what's the one thing to take away from this? If you're gonna talk to anybody that's achieved any level of success, they worked hard for it. You know, that's probably the truth. They'll be very rare if they're like, oh, I bought this NFT, I had no clue what it is, and now I'm a millionaire, right? Like that's such a small part of the population. Right. I accidentally bought some Apple stock one time and now I'm a billionaire. And I think, what's his name? David Cho is a good example of that. I might have that wrong. I'll think about it. But he's an artist and he painted the murals on the Facebook when their original big site. He painted the murals and they paid him in stock. And then that stock vested and he's a multimillionaire now. and he's an artist by trade. It's what he does, right? So he's just, dude, you should watch his Joe Rogan podcast is insane. I love the guy. He's such an eccentric. He's all over the place, but like he has a very unique perspective on success and happiness. And you know, I do want to jump into kind of like my path and stuff, but as we're on it, you know, for me, I'm starting to measure a lot more success on happiness. And I think that's, you know, really key because I've read studies and I've been around people, and just the chase of money doesn't bring happiness, both statistically and just really kind of seeing it. And that's not to say money doesn't bring happiness, because it solves a lot of problems. But if your only goal in life is to continue to make money and more money, there's a threshold for that. And as it pertains to happiness, right? And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. Is I'm reflecting, I'm taking in like everything that I've achieved, I'm appreciating it, and I'm looking towards the future. But I'm being realistic and being like, I don't, not that I wouldn't want to be as famous as like, let's say Joe Rogan, but that's not a drive for me. It's not necessarily a desire, right? That sort of money, like I'm very realistic, and I know that the amount of money you actually need to make to survive is far less than $1 million a year, far, far less, right? And people are stuck on that number, $1 million, but like, you live in San Diego, it's a little more, or in San Diego, yeah,
a little bit north of it, but yeah, it's still down here in SoCal.
It's expensive in SoCal, yeah. So in California, it's a little different depending on where you live, but you know, there's a threshold, and it's like the first goal, I think, is make enough money to support your family and yourself and keep your finances in order, right? The second goal is to be in a position to start to invest that money for retirement and for your family success. And so that amount is a lot, don't get me wrong, but it's an achievable amount. So that's where I'm at with like my goal setting.
Yeah, that's my mindset as well, going into even this podcast. Like, you know, if it takes off and it ends up making enough to where I'm making right now for work, like that'd be the dream. Yeah. I'm making enough to supplement my work income, because then I could stop working.
Yeah. And
But
it's surprisingly, with social media, podcasting, advertising, it's surprisingly not that difficult, right? But the problem is, like you said, is you have a vision of like, oh, I want this to be with like 2 people because I want to repartee back and forth, and I want it to look a certain way and all of this stuff. And you start to like, you stop making content because you're not matching what you want. But what I guess what you would consider a marketing expert, and the number one thing I tell people is content. It's consistency, right? But even in myself, and you probably found this, it's very tough to be consistent. It's a tough thing to do.
Even like on our original podcast I had with my buddy, it's like they're kind of similar, the 2 episodes, but then they're vastly different all at the same time. Like when we originally planned it out, we're like, okay, we're going to have this specific mindset of, talking about our stories when we're in the Navy, bringing like maybe some awareness to what veterans go through and different programs that might be out there. But it's easy to get sidetracked and have fun just shooting the shit.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And like, it's funny because even after the one I did with John last week, I was like, man, I just got too excited just talking to John. I was like, I haven't talked to him in like 16 years. Like, man, this is just cool catching up.
Yeah.
Like going back to even like one of the guys I hope to have on as well, who started his own company just recently. He posted something on Instagram talking about, we're talking about this, becoming wealthy and stuff like that. But he posted something like, for him, having the freedom of time is wealth. Yeah. And he has a family also, so I can't wait to have him on here also, because that mindset is different than like what you're saying. Most people just they see that $1 million and that's like, man, I got to get that $1 million. But right. What if making a good amount of money to where you can live a good life, like you say, you don't need $1 million to live.
Right.
But having
even a good life, right? Even a great life, you don't need, you could make that amount of money if you're willing to pivot in your life. You can do that, right? And like great life for a lot of people, like owning a boat, owning jet skis, being able to take your family on 2 vacations a year, like being able to live in California, right? We are so close to all of these things, is an achievable thing. And not to, I know most of the statistics on, the homeless rate and education rates and things like that. So not to say it's easy for everybody, but it is an achievable thing to have a great life, right? And the number one thing is perspective, to show gratitude for what you do have, recognize your achievements, and then ultimately have perspective and realize that if you have a computer in front of you and you have the time and opportunity and the supportive wife to do a podcast, you're already blessed. You're already winning in life, right?
Exactly. Yeah, this is already a foot in the right direction,
Yeah.
And like even at my grandparents' 60th anniversary, my grandpa told everybody this, and I think it rings true. He said he never had a lot of money, but he had a lot of love. And it's like, and they're in their 80s now. It's like that's a reflective thing, even, and it hits you as a young person hearing that. It's like, man, he's right. They never drove super fancy cars or had a big house, but God, they were always around. They were always around, taking us to school, picking us up. Like they enjoyed, I would imagine, having us, I hope, right next door, living next to us, doing all these, making those memories with us, and being such an integral part of our lives and their lives. Like they got to have those memories, and tell their friends about those things, because not everybody is lucky enough to have that type of freedom of time.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's ultimately my goal, even with this podcast or just in life in general, is to have time where I'm that age and I look back and can be like, man, you know what? I saw my kids grow up. I was at all their games, all their practices, all their dances, whatever it may be, and never really missed anything, because so many people do. And having that regret, I think later in life that'd be harder to live with than saying, hey, I made $1 million, but I missed everything. So
right. Yeah. And that's the trade-off. And you see that a lot with a lot of entrepreneurs. They can't manage time and family, and Some of it might be greed, some of it might just be bad timing in life, right? You never really know. It's a tough thing to navigate if this is the direction you try to take your life. And I'm lucky to have a supportive wife who is very driven the same way I have. But in past relationships, the amount of work that I've had to do, not even wanted to, had to do, just wasn't sustainable for relationships, right? So there's trade-offs. There's trade-offs for sure.
And I think it's a central part too in a relationship. Like you want to be with somebody that, you lift each other up. So like you're saying, your wife's driven, you're driven. My wife's the same way. Like we both have goals. We never stop each other from achieving them. It's that knowing when to be the cheerleader.
Right.
Actually, it's like, go do it.
Yeah.
If you're struggling trying to figure out what you want to do, we'll take some time, figure out what you want to do. There's nothing, we're not holding you back. That's why I view it from my wife, even like our family's not going to hold you back from achieving what you want to achieve, whether it's doing a podcast, whether it's, want to become a fitness guru and you want to, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So I think that's where a lot of it starts too, is having, if you are in a relationship, having that person that pushes you also, instead of having the anchor that kind of crushes your dreams, weighs you down a little bit.
Yeah, that gets a critical, and that's not just your partner that you have here. I've learned that same thing with business partners. I've done a lot of consulting work, so we're just all of those partnerships, friendships, mentorships, all of that stuff. You'll start to see the correlation between like your love life and that what you put into that, because these people start to become family with you, and it can be really tough to navigate that and understand that people don't do business the same way, right? And I approach business from a very probably like an arrogant level of morality, and it's not the quickest or fastest way, or maybe even the best way to make money. But at the end of the day, I'm proud of myself for sticking to a certain level of standards, in what I do, right? And that's a hard thing to do in the real estate and home loan industry, because that's one of the reasons we had that crash, not too long ago. There's just so many people cheating the American public and making a lot of money off of it. And so, I knew that when I got into this industry, I was like, I'm going to do it the way that I want to do it. And I was very lucky to end up at a brokerage and with a broker who we believe the same way. So that's critical. But should we just jump into my life story now that we're 37 minutes in?
Yeah, let's do it. I have a quick question too on the real estate part though, because I've been seeing this pop up a lot, and like just I don't know how it even popped up, but it's starting to pop up in like my feeds on all my social media stuff. Selling houses.
Yeah.
Is that one of those things where it seems like, to me, it seems kind of shady? It seems like it, because they're kind of like the middleman. I don't know if you've experienced
wholesaling
a house.
No, it's a really, so here's the thing, right? There's a lot of, like, where a broker is a middleman, right? So you can go directly to a lender like a bank and get a home loan, right? Or you can go through a broker like us who works with all of the major brokers through the country, or the major lenders to the country, and can shop rates for you, right? So there's a lot of in-between positions. It's kind of like any corporate. There's like these middle management people. So wholesaling is very much like that. What wholesaling does is their skill set is that they know investors. That's their skill set, really, right? So what they do is they find a property before an investor can find a property, and they pick it up. And then they sell that contract to an investor, and they get to keep the in-between money, right? Because there's just not enough time, especially when you get to that level of investing. There's not enough time to go to every house. There's not enough time to look at every deal. And so they found a niche, right? They found there has to be it's a tough gig, because you have to find properties that you have to get it at such a low rate that you can make money off it, and the investor will make money off of it. So it's a nice way to go, and you don't need a real estate license to do it, which isn't, it's nice. But again, There's a skill set there. There's a networking group you need to have in place. You have to be able to offload it pretty quickly, or you're going to be eating it. And so, yeah,
that's one of those things where it seems like people jump into it because they know they can make money, but they don't realize how hard it is actually.
Yeah. Real estate's very much like that. There's this big thing that like 20% of realtors do 80% of the business.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still relatively new. I'm only a couple years into real estate. My technical position is vice president of development. And so my background is very heavy in media. So I run our media side, Orbit Media. And then we have a real estate brokerage and a home loan brokerage. And so I am in all three of those. And so I have my real estate license, I have my home loan license. I mostly do home loans, but I do all of that because I do the business development for us. I help with that business development with my broker. Right now I'm working on our website. So I'm turning our website from, let's say, like 20 pages into like 180 pages, right? So that's the SEO development on the back end for the media side. So I have a pretty good knowledge base, and I've been in it long enough, and I have a business sense because I had a business and I've been working since I was 15. There's so many people that are bad at real estate. There's so many people that are going to screw you over, or you're going to lose money or whatever because they don't know how to do their job, or they're not competent, or they're not willing to ask, or they don't have resources, right? That's just the reality. And it's really bad because this is a huge purchase. This is a huge purchase. And, you could be leaving a lot of money on the table if you work with the wrong people. And this is where I mean by like, we put all of our realtors in a position to be successful. So the hardest thing, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is when you have to do a job because you absolutely need money now, right? That puts you in a really bad position, because even if you are an ethical and good person, you might have to do something a little shady because you need money to survive, right? So at our brokerage, we don't charge any additional fees, and we cover a lot of stuff. And then on top of that, we do our media in-house. So we will cover all of your media for like properties and all of that stuff. So literally we don't make a dime. We actually lose money on every realtor until they make money, right?
Oh.
The reason we do that, and I don't want to get off on a tangent on this, but the reason we do that, and this is kind of part of my ethos of life, is that we want people to enter the job and build a career from a position of being okay, right? Not from a place of panic, because a lot of these places, they charge up to $500 to $1,000 a month just to be under their brokerage. You're not making any money. So you might spend $500, you might spend $6,000, $3,000 in your first 6 months and have made no money, because the average realtor takes 9 months to make a deal, right? By then you might just have made no money. And so that's the sort of thing that we're attacking. That's the sort of way that I live my life, is how can I make everybody else's life better? How can I make things a little more streamlined? How can we do this in a way that's actually best for our customers, but still services you, because you need to put food on your table and support your family, right? Yeah. And it's very difficult to do it from that way. It's very costly upfront on our end. But ultimately, if we can create a space for anybody that works under you where they're being treated correctly, I think you're going to get a higher productivity out of everybody, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
let's jump into what you're doing, because that's kind of a good segue. Because I saw, I've seen some of your podcasts before, listened to them, and I think it was on your Hard Money one actually, where I think it was you talking. You had talked about kind of investing in like a person essentially that you hire. Like, can you come in 10 minutes earlier? When you hire somebody, you're basically saying your family. So,
that's such a tough thing to do, right? So let me I'll be very quick about this, kind of my background, right? Because a lot of people aren't going to understand why I approach business the way that I do. It's very unorthodox. And I'm by no means like a great success. I would say that I'm still what you would consider like middle class, but from where I started, that's winning, right?
Exactly.
So from the time that you knew me from junior high and high school, I lived in a group home with 5 other kids, right? Essentially, I was a ward of the government. And so the statistics um, for graduating high school is only like 25% of foster youth graduate from high school, right? Only like 1% go to college and graduate college. Obviously, less than that go to a higher degree after that, right? And so, and granted, getting a degree no longer means we're probably our generation before us was the last generation where that made sense.
Oh yeah.
Now it's very like it's up in the air. I got to be super strategic about it. But while we were in that position, it was very much like if you want to be successful, you probably should still go to school, especially if you grew up in foster care. And so, that's one of the reasons I was so competitive and so driven in high school with sports and academics. And, I was class president our senior year. And I did all of that because I wanted to put myself in a position to learn stuff, to be in the mix and become advantageous, right? But because I've come from a place that's very like, if there's a starting line, I'm like 10 feet behind that starting line. And that's the reality of going into out of the system and being on your own, right? So when I was in college, I was homeless 3 times while in college. And granted, I was very lucky because I was in a fraternity. A lot of my fraternity brothers took me in, let me crash on the couch, like no money, like help feed me. I was very lucky in that sense. And I did have some extended kind of my best friend. I don't know if you remember Jake Pino, but
He's
but he was in our class. But his family is kind of my extended family now, and so I had resources, but it's so amazingly tough to have really no resources, no money reserves, nobody to fall back on. And so that was kind of my experience going through college. Is I had to work 2 jobs. Through my tenure, I went to Sac State. I ran 7 clubs. One of them being president of my fraternity, and then president of IFC for 2 years, which looks over all the fraternities. But I used it every aspect of what college is, right? And I think that's where a lot of people are failing these days. Is they go, well, I'm just going to go to college, and especially at Sac State, it was a commuter school, and I went there. They go to school, they leave, right? I didn't do that. I started clubs, I joined clubs, I worked on campus and off campus. I made a lot of friends with athletes, and I took full advantage of every opportunity, but it came at a sacrifice, right? I mean, there was a lot of times where I went a couple of days without being able to eat, and that's tough to do. When you have to prioritize working and doing these other things to make you successful instead of prioritizing having food on your table, that's really tough. And that's kind of the role that you take as a foster youth. You just have to do these things that a lot of people don't really understand. And that was kind of it, right? It was a big sacrifice, but I felt like that was going to pay off. And I graduated at Sac State. It took me a little bit longer than most, but I did it. And then I went to grad school. And again, that took me a little longer than most, but I did that. And while I was doing that, I was continuing to build my work experience, right? Like I said, I started working when I was 15. I was a lifeguard. I got my first management job when I was 18. And I kind of just kept doing that. Any job that I had, my goal was to go from where I was to a manager, right? And I was pretty relatively successful at that. But again, it always, you're always coming from a place of behind. And that's been my journey most of the time. But it's been really fun in the way that I have to engage in so many other things that now I feel like so well versed on a lot of stuff as I'm finally settling down into like a little bit of comfort. It feels really good, right? To know these things, to feel confident. And my time is finally worth what I think it is. And I think that's the big struggle for a long time when you're learning a trade, you're learning a skill set, you're getting an education. It's so hard to place what is my time worth,
Yeah.
right?
And that's, I guess that's what I was going to kind of like where you're hearing your story. Like I didn't know you were, in a group home or anything like that even back then. Like I think of like even my dad, your story kind of reminds me of my dad's because he grew up in the projects, like really rough childhood. Yeah. But he's always grinded. Like he's the hardest working person I've ever met. Thinking about like I can remember you in junior high, even high school, very sociable, outgoing person. And it seems like
I was lucky, right? Too, like there is a lot of luck into this because being like I've always been naturally extroverted. I've always been pretty like a nice person. Like I don't really want to have beef with anybody. And the one thing I always like, thank God I was athletic, right? I could pretty much, because in my time of going to school, I went to 21 different schools. And I always was the new kid. And the number one thing that saved me was being athletic. Right. So I remember the same thing happened at fucking Ross. I remember this. I went, and the first day I wanted to play basketball and I got picked last. And the next day I got picked like probably in the top 5 because you always got picked first. And then a couple other guys who were out there who were pretty good. But like I became one of the main guys. And that's pretty much what I did at every school: football, kickball, tetherball, basketball. I could go out and I can compete, and I worked hard. And that's unfortunately like a lot of kids that grow up in foster care, they're not sociable and they don't get a lot of interactions to do that. And I think that's part of why they fail in life, unfortunately. But yeah, I was really lucky. And I was lucky that most people were pretty nice in Houston, right? They're very welcoming. And so that was a cool experience.
Yeah, like when I think of sports specifically, my dad he played every sport you could growing up. He didn't have his father growing up. He just had his mom and 8 other siblings. So kind of the same thing, like a scrap of food was like, man, I remember growing up, if you're not going to eat your dinner, he like flip. Completely. He's like, you don't throw away food,
Yeah.
And but like hearing his story and hearing yours, like sports was a great outlet because he's also very sociable. My dad, I mean, everybody talks to him. He's very like a welcoming person. Like if you're a stranger, you can kind of come up to him and he'll just strike up a conversation. Like all the time. Like we'll go out to eat when I'm up there, and you'll see the waiters or waitresses name tag. He's like, hey, how you doing? And say their name, and they're like, oh, like they get excited and they start talking to him.
Yeah.
Like nobody ever notices them.
That's like one level above me. That's where I would love to be there, because I admire those people so much, because they are the best salespeople, because they can just talk to anybody and people just like them. And I'm a likable person, but I'm not like how's it going today, Marty? Like, you're killing it at cleaning the tables. You know what I mean? Like, but there are people that they are like that, and they're amazing. They're like, to me, they're some of the best people because they're just generally nice people. They just like really like to know people, and that's amazing.
Yeah, and like thinking about, because you hear like stories of like yourselves, and like I think of Josh Jacobs on the Raiders, who grew up in a car. He was homeless. There's I mean, I don't know that. I didn't really experience like, I guess, poverty until I got out of the Navy. I had a tough stretch where I didn't have a job. It was, living in cockroaches and everything on our food. It's like, that was like the first sense of like, holy crap, like I got really do something. But you hear stories of like yourself, and I think my dad and Josh Jacobs, I've always thought that's where I have admiration for him. It's like really pulling yourself out of your situation, because a lot of people I think can fall like victim to that situation. From outside looking in, obviously. But like I think of my dad, he saw like his friend die when he was a kid growing up in the projects, and like it gets really easy for him to say, I'm not going to do schoolwork, I'm not going to play sports, I'm going to hang out with my buddies and get into trouble and blow off school, not look for a job. And that's where I have like admiration for folks like yourself, because I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have had both my parents and they're still together. That's extremely rare to have growing up. But I think at the same time, luckily my dad had that path growing up because he feeds that level of hunger still. Like I was saying, the whole throwing away food. I'm still like that. No, I don't throw away food ever. I like when my son does it, I'm like, no, dude, you got to eat your food. Lucky grandpa is not here.
I mean, it's a good, especially with the rising food prices right now. So a good practice to have. But yeah, man, it's really tough. But essentially, you know, I did college. I did grad school. I kept working. I went to grad school for media and public relations, and my undergrad was in organizational communication. And so I have developed a really strong sense for business development as a whole. And so I started doing consulting work for that. And funny enough, I actually wanted to join the military. I spent probably the better part of 2.5 years training to join the Marines. I wanted to be a scout sniper. That's like, I was very passionate about it. And I know that's like, it's such a douchebag thing because everyone's like, oh yeah, I want to be a sniper in the Marines. But I was like 100% like committed to that cause. And I dedicated all of my free time that I wasn't doing everything else to learning, like reading the scout sniper manuals, doing like weird shit like snail crawls, and I learned like weird metrics because, you know, when you're in other countries and you know this, like they know the average height of a telephone pole, and then they know the average height of a person, and they can calculate the distance based off of that, right? Mm-hmm. And so I learned all of this really weird shit that I have no use for right now. And I was training, and at the time I was doing wrestling, and I messed up my back. And they were essentially, they're like, you have, you know, this lower back disc issue. And I was like, well, there goes that dream, right? Mm-hmm. And I also met, when I was lifeguarding, I met this scout sniper who had came to swim at the pool, and I saw he had a hog's tooth on. And I was like, it was like seeing a celebrity for me, dude. I like jogged over there, and I was like, hey, like, are you in the Marines? Like, are you a sniper? And he's like, how'd you know that? And I was like, oh, well, you have the hog's tooth on. And he's like, oh, and I was like telling him what I wanted to do. And he's like, you're in college. And he's like, he told me straight out, he's like, if you join the Marines and you do that, you're a freaking idiot. He's like, you have a college degree. You don't go in and do that. And he's like, you would be stupid to do that. And that didn't never change my mind because I'm kind of hard-headed. But I just remember that conversation. But to your point, right? Like there's going to be all of these adversities. There's going to be these things that happen in your life, right? Being homeless. Like I remember countless amount of days where I had to stay up 3-4 days in a row with no sleep to get work done. I went to college with no computer, no laptop. Nobody fucking told me that I needed one. And so I was like struggling, dude, for like the first couple of months I was there. I was like, how do I get this work done? It wasn't as many resources as there are now. And so, but I graduated, I went to grad school, I kept working. And then I moved back to the Central Valley for 18 months, where Jake was having a kid, his sister was having a kid, their cousin was having a kid. And so I kind of moved back. I spent time with family. I worked out there in nonprofit. I kept coaching. I coached for 12 years, so wrestling and swimming. And then I got a job back in Sacramento, and that's around the same time I met my wife. Very lucky because she's from England. And so it was a very kind of weird meetup. And I started a business with one of my fraternity brothers, and we started a renewable energy gym. So I was helping him build that at the same time that I was working for the Boy Scouts. And because I'm so obsessively driven with metrics and being the best, I was working 80, 100-hour weeks for the Boy Scouts, and I was doing the business on the side, and I was maintaining the relationship with my wife. And it was tough. It was so tough.
Because you're putting everybody's kind of priorities over your own self.
Yeah, it was really tough. And this is where like your friend who was talking about the value of time. I did not learn the value in time until I got done working there, right? Because I've always had to be the type of person that would work as much as I possibly could to even get where, not ahead, just to get where I could survive, right? And so I finally had like a decent salary job. I had some time to where I lived right around the corner from our gym we were building. We were getting a lot of traction with the gym because we were the first renewable energy gym in the country. And so we were winning awards. We were on the news globally. We had partners in different parts of the world. We had about 20 people that wanted a franchise. We were going to Portugal. We won the National Hispanic Chamber of Commerce Award. Just like all this stuff, it was crazy, man. But it just takes a toll, all of this stuff, right? And I was doing all of that. And while I was doing that, I was in Rotary. I joined ECV, which is kind of like a drinking tribute group to America in California. It's very popular in the Valley. I'm in the Freemasons. I've been in the Freemasons for 8 years. And so I do all of these extra things as well, because I understand how important it is to stay involved with your community, right? And then I kind of like accidentally lateraled into the real estate industry because I had thousands of dollars of equipment. I had developed a skill set over 10 years of knowing how to work audio equipment, videography, photography, how to do everything that's encompassed with that, including editing, but I wasn't using anything. And so I talked to my broker and I just asked them, like, can I have coffee with you and talk to you? And this is where taking advantage of opportunity is extremely important. And just, putting it out there. And I just asked them, like, is there a market for this, or is it oversaturated or whatever? And he pretty much told me, like, well, you're actually lucky, because I'm looking for somebody to bring on, because I need to develop this in our company, right? And I had an opportunity to look, and just the photos that you see on some of these houses are terrible. The videos are terrible. And that's just how it is sometimes. So I was like, okay, it seems like there could be some money made here. Yeah. And then he's like, you should get your real estate license. And I was like, all right, I'll do that. So I spent 6 months getting my real estate license. Then he's like, you should get your loan license. And all right, I spent another 6 months doing that, right? And I was still kind of doing this, getting my real estate license while I was working for the Scouts. So it's really tough because we were doing that. And
was the gym still going on during this?
The gym's still going on too. Working for that. And yeah, all of it was going on. And then the interesting thing, me and my buddy, who I worked with, where he's like my best friend, we both worked for the Scouts, but he's a little further north of me. We'd always talk like to us, not to anybody else. We would talk shit about everybody, because I lucked out. I came into the Boy Scouts is broken up into councils, and those councils are in regions, right? So we're like in the Western region, and there's like the Northwest region and whatever, right? So our council is one of the strongest councils. Sacramento Council is one of the strongest councils in the nation. So I had a really strong team. I had an extremely strong CEO and like vice president, all of these guys, really strong volunteer base. So I came into a great situation, and the person who had my job had got promoted in the company, which is very rare. So he was there too. And my first year, I essentially finished #1 in my company, in my council, which means I was in the top percent nationally, right? Yeah. And then my second year, I went off, dude. I went like, you never seen somebody so obsessed with their job, right? I went off, and everything in the Boy Scouts is metriced, right? Everything. And so exactly while you're doing, what your performance is. That's how they decide. And so I got them to promote me 6 months early. Then 6 months earlier than the minimum that they ask people to stay before they promote them, right? So I got me and my buddy promoted early. And then I finished in the top 10 in the country for what I did. And that's out of probably around 2,000 people at the time, somewhere around there. And I was doing that while I was doing the gym. And so we would always, once we had time to breathe, we would always laugh like, oh, look at these idiots, can't even do that. I'm doing this and I'm doing that, right? But that's the sort of thing I just had to do because of how I grew up, right? I was like, I have to do this, I have to do that. And that's how life is sometimes. You're in these bad situations, Maybe you're not where you want to be. And sometimes you just put your head down and you don't even think about everything you need to do. You say, what do I need to do right now? And you do it. What's the next thing? You do it. And if you do that, you find a way to get into a groove with that, you'll be successful, right? You'll just get it done. You'll either get to a point where you realize this is impossible, which I haven't reached that point yet, or you say like, I can do better at this, and you achieve, right? So but yeah, I did all of that. So I was like, all right. But again, I was working 100 hours a week. It was so hard. And my body started to like break down, dude. I like started to have these really bad chronic feet issues that still continue to now, that I'm still trying to fix, because I prioritize everything except for health. And I owned a gym and I was at the gym, right? So that's the irony of the whole thing, right? Is like being so physically unhealthy, but owning a gym.
That's what's crazy, because that's what it sounds like. Like you're constantly running around.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, if you're working those crazy 80 plus hours at one place and then juggling 3 other things at once, like you're not getting obviously the sleep where, they say what 7 hours is the minimum. I think now they're saying like 9, which is crazy.
I
don't know how people sleep 7 hours. Their day's over by that point.
Yeah.
But prioritizing everything else, and then you're not getting elite. Because I have a mindset too, like if I can get 5 hours of sleep, I think that's pretty good. Like I can function off 5 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Not the healthiest thing to do over a long period.
I do 8 now. I used to do 3 to 5. That was like a standard, but I do 8 now because my priority now is working smarter, right? So I'm forcing myself, where if I used to work 12-hour days, I asked myself, realistically, could I turn that 12 hours into an 8-hour day, right? And then I asked myself, can I turn that 8-hour day into a 6-hour day or a 4-hour day? And that's what the new skill set I'm trying to develop for myself is, how hard can I work in those hours to actually get work done so I can buy back my own time, right?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the goal, is like, because I've seen that I see a number of people talk about that. The funny thing, first time I heard about like basically optimizing your day, I think it was on Colin Cowherd one day. I was listening to the show and he's like, you get, I think he said you sleep for 6 hours, you get 18 hours to, you say you work 8 to 12 hours, what are you going to do with the rest of that time? You cook, you do all these other things. He's like, that takes another 3 or 4 hours. So you have like 2 hours, say, to yourself or free time. What are you going to do with those 2 hours? Are you going to bullshit it away, essentially? Are you going to play video games? Are you going to, I don't know, do something that's not useful in a sense, like you're not investing those 2 hours into yourself. And then kind of like, I think what I'm picking up what you're saying, you invest those 2 hours and then you eventually that 2 hours, now you have 4 hours of free time, because now you're freeing up, you're finding to do certain things in a certain amount of time.
And you get better at it too, right?
Yeah.
Right. Eventually this podcast will take you less time to produce because you have the skill set developed now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what sucked putting the last one together. It's been such a long time since I've done it. I could not figure out how to edit my videos anymore. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I have to do that sometimes. I have to go back and like YouTube a video on how to do a certain function in Illustrator or whatever. But yeah, dude. So essentially I did that. He was like, hey, come over, right? And I hung my real estate license with him, and I was helping a couple people out. I brokered my own house during the peak of the pandemic, got my wife into a house, and then I helped a couple other people out. And while we were doing that, our home loan side had a ton of business, like a lot of business. And he's essentially like, would you want to come work for me and do this, right? Become a loan processor. And I pretty much asked him, like, how much are you going to pay me? I was like, I can't make anything less than what I'm making now, because that's how my budget's set up, right? And essentially he told me, like, this is what the business is going to look like. I'm going to get paid a salary plus commission. And it was kind of a leap of faith. I called my wife. Literally, this is how it went down. I went to his office to meet him for something. He's like, hey, can you do this? And I was like, I had that conversation with him about money. And then I was like, let me call my wife. So I literally right there, I called my wife and I was like, hey, can I would you be comfortable with me doing this? She said, if that's what you want to do, do it. And I said, all right. And she knew him as well. So it kind of, that made it a little easier. Yeah. And then I literally got off that call. I called my boss and said, hey, I'm putting in my 2 weeks. And he was like, they were like so surprised because I was killing it out there, right? Obviously, they thought like, oh, this guy's going to be a career person, right? And I was like, I'm putting in my 2 weeks notice. And I had this opportunity. I got recruited and I'm going to take it, right? And so I did that. And then in my first year, I got my loan license as well. So I can process, or I can originate loans on my own and not just be the processor, right? And it gives me a much deeper understanding of the functionality of all three businesses. So when we do bring on new people, I can coach them, right? Mm-hmm. So I've been doing that. And my wife and I are building our own online education platform where we will start with loan origination. And essentially the hope is that we will be able to branch into other sectors that require certifications to be employed, right? And the general idea is that most people don't remember how to study, right? It's, you know, most people are like out of school for a while, even if they went to college, probably still for a while. There's they don't know how to study, so it makes it that much harder. Even though the content's not super hard, they forget how to do that. So we're designing this to make it a little bit easier on them. And I can't get too much into it because it's still in development, but the idea is to essentially give the power back to the consumer so they can enter into a field that can make them more money. That's what I'm trying to do. That's everything we do, is how do we help people? How do we solve that problem, right? That's the problem. And you solve the problem and you make money and you help people. So I do LO, I do real estate, I do media, and my wife and I are building this business. And then in my free time, I do long range shooting.
I was going to say what free time, but yeah, I've seen some of your videos where you guys are, or both of you are shooting. It's like hearing how much you're doing. I'm like, God, where do you find even?
Well, that's another one of my skill sets that I'm trying to learn, right? Is leisure is a privilege, right? Yeah. That's the truth. And I had a shit ton of fun in college. Don't get me wrong, but true leisure when you're in the workforce is pretty tough to come by, where you're not thinking about your work and things like that. And like I said, I wanted to be in the Marines. I wanted to shoot. I was deeply passionate about that. And I thought this was probably the best way to go, right? So I built a custom rifle. Granted, I didn't like actually build the components, but I did put it together myself. I'm learning how to shoot, 1,000 yards and be, tactical about that. And I hope to get into PRS shooting and maybe someday F-class shooting. And so my broker, who's extremely hardworking, we're very similar. He kind of mentioned that. He's like, you got to have a hobby, man. He's like, if you don't have a hobby, you have no joy in life. You can't just work all the time. You can't focus everything on, making money. And I'm trying to learn that, right, as I get older, because for my entire life, the only thing that mattered was making money because I didn't have it, right? And it's easy to say money doesn't matter when you have a lot of it. But when you don't have much, you're like, this is the most important thing in the world. And so
that's very true.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at right now. We're trying to build. We feel like the magic number in how we want to live our lives, how we want to retire, and how we want to invest is $300,000 a year. That's what we think. Living in California with inflation and living where we live, we feel like that's the magic number, right? That we need to make between the two of us in our household. So if we can build something kind of the same way you are, if you can build a podcast that brings in an extra $10,000 a year, $5,000, $1,000 a year, right? That's a huge difference. And a lot of people, they think too big, and they don't realize that, let's say, for instance, your water bill, $1,000 would probably cover most of your water bill for the year.
Yeah. Right? That's a significant amount of money towards some smaller bills,
anything, dude. And that's how I approach a lot of the extra things I do. I just got I don't do it very often anymore, because one, it's really expensive for businesses to do it, and most businesses just can't afford it. but consulting work, right? So I just got one of my friends back from the Valley was like, hey, there's this guy, he needs help on his business. So I went, I met with him with my wife. We talked for like 3 hours. And essentially, I was like, look, the things that you want are really expensive. Let me do this for you and I will help you out. Right. So, with my education, with my experience, the price range for my skill set is about $200 an hour. Right. Mm-hmm. So, I did this project for him and it took about 30 hours to do. Right. But I didn't charge him that. I charged him about $50 an hour because I like the guy, because I understand that with COVID, people are in a situation right now. And that's, that's enough money for me. And that's where, when I start to talk about like the ethical part of how I do business, like there's a level of greed, right? It's like, do I need, $1,500? Like an extra $1,500 is a lot of money, right? Do I need $3,000? And a lot of people will say, well, you're an idiot. If he'll pay you $3,000, take $3,000, right? But that's just not how I like to do business. Like I like to go above and beyond for people. I like to build long lasting relationships, and I like to look at the actual value of what I'm doing and price it out that way, right? Right now, to get a marketing consultant to run social media for you, and I was just looking at it, it's freaking crazy. 20 posts a month, right? 20 posts a month. They're charging $3,000 to $8,000.
Holy, yeah, that's
to do 20 posts a month.
That's absurd.
That's crazy. Like right? That's crazy.
Like 20 posts a day or 200.
Right. Like yeah, exactly. Right. And I understand that the skill set of understanding how to do this business is there. And I get there's like this price range, but that's just pure greed. That's what that is, right? Like that's so much, especially with all of the systems that we have automated, all of the program. It's not like you have to go into Adobe now and create all of this stuff from scratch. There's all these platforms that can do that, right? So that's how I approach everything, and that's where I've been for a really long time. Is I've kind of got out of that phase in my life where I've finally have reached that phase in my life where I'm not foster care, right? A foster care kid, because it's like in my mind, I always said I have to make enough money so I'm middle class. I'm where everybody else would be, right? And that's where I wanted to be, and that's a level of comfort. And so I'm finally at that level of comfort in my life, and that's another challenge in itself, right? Because really only success comes out of difficulty. And once you start to feel comfortable, you're kind of like, this is pretty nice, but luckily I still got a little bit there. But that's where I've been for such a long time. And now that I'm there, and now that I've surrounded myself with people who are much more successful than myself and are much more rich than me and much, I don't want to say happier, but they're happy as well. I'm starting to realize these other things that you bring up, right? Time is value, wealth, health is wealth. Doing things that you're passionate about that can actually make you money. That's where I'm at in life now.
Mm-hmm. And I think you hit like on a thing I like in my industry that I'm in. Like I basically work in sales, like project manage. Mm-hmm. I used to work at a competitor, and in the company I work at now, basically recruited me, kind of the same deal, more money. I got like promoted my first 4 months there. Like, damn, everything I wanted from my previous company that I was working for wouldn't give it to me, busting my ass off. And it's like, okay, I'm not reaping any sort of benefits from working hard. So then literally they're on opposite sides of the freeway in the same exact industry, which is but
you just wave at them with your new Apple Watch. You're like, what's up?
What's up?
What I can afford now.
You guys should have paid me. So I got poked. But like the good thing is, like, my previous company was a family owned company, so it was very relationship driven, especially my mentor over there. Like he was really, he'd been there for like 15 years, number one in sales, like doing $2 million a month in sales we did underground utility work, like manholes, vaults, stuff like that. For up there to be like PG&E stuff up in NorCal, underground utility work. And he's very customer driven, like he'd bite the bullet on a PO or on a quote saying, hey, you know what, I can take off $10,000 on this massive job, but guess what? They're gonna come back. They're going to keep coming back and keep coming back. So kind of like we were talking about, the relationship aspect of it is that you're also investing not only in the exact moment, the first gain of money that you're going to get, but the long-term relationship. I just literally ran into that this week with my current company. Like, we sent something out, I had to break it up, this one piece of concrete, into multiple pieces, ship it, because we're holding up their job. And our dispatcher's like, hey, our freight's supposed to be $800, but you charge them like $425. I'm like, well, I split it because it's like, if I don't do that, we're going to get back charged.
Right.
But also investing in them. Like, they don't have an account with us yet, but now I've been over backwards. I'd rather lose $425 right now, $425, and gain another $20,000 purchase.
Right, exactly. And I think that's what you're learning right there, or maybe you've already learned, that that's what a career salesperson is, right? Yep. That's the problem too. There's an overwhelming amount of people who are in sales who are not career salespeople, right? People who are career sales, I always think, you remember King of the Hill?
Yeah.
so Hank's a career sales guy for propane, right? Yep. And that's his whole thing. He's like, I talk to him, I treat them nice, I show them everything, and if they want to go, I let them go, because then they come back and they buy, and I have a customer for life, right? Yep. And a lot of people that are in sales don't understand that, because they're looking for a quick buck, they're impatient and things like that. But the people that are successful, they build relationships, and that's a lot harder to do now, especially the last 2 years of with COVID. And networking has pretty much gone out the door for a lot of things, but it's getting better. But that's the truth, right? You're learning that. Anybody who starts to get into sales type starts to learn that. And hopefully you have a business behind you that supports that, right? And this is where it becomes very difficult. We're having a conversation, if we're trying to bring value to your viewers, right? We're having this conversation of, I think the average person stays at their job right now like 9 months, and then they move to a new job, right? So it's huge. It's much different than these, like our parents, who would have been lifelong people at their company, or maybe would have moved once or twice ever, right? And it's very tough for me to have this conversation, because as a previous business owner, and then as a person who was an employee that worked for a nonprofit who gave 100 hours a week of his time, I understand and recognize both perspectives, right? If you're not being paid for what your value is, and you understand that you're bringing in more money and they're not helping you at all, then yeah, you got to kind of go. But from the business standpoint, a lot of small businesses, probably like that family run business you have, right? It's kind of like, well, they're just trying, and keep in mind, majority of business that's in California is small business. It's not large business, right? It's like 90% of business in California is small business. So it's tough to see it from both perspectives, because you're like, well, if you're a small business, it's like, I built the business, I took on all the liability, all the responsibility, I pay you guys money. I did this because I don't want to be like an employee. I want to have a big house. I want to have a nice whatever, right? And I understand that. I totally respect that. But then on the other side, you're an employee, and you're like, well, I see you drive, $100,000 truck, and I'm driving this like piece of crap that's like, I have to, I can barely make it to work every week. So it's such a tough place to be. But all I can say is, do what's best for you, but try to do it with some grace, right? Like, try to do what's good for you. That's the world we live in. And if you don't, you're going to be in a tough spot. But if you can help others in the process, then do that. And that's just how I kind of try to live my life. And I try to have that balance. It's not always possible, but it's like, that's a good example, right? And I had this conversation with one of my guys. It might actually be on one of my old podcasts. We talked about our gardener, right? And this stems very deep into religion, into politics, and I don't want to get into that necessarily, but we have this gardener, we move into our house, right? and he essentially is mowing the lawn. I don't know this guy. And I was like, hey, like, are you the owner? I hadn't met the owner or anything. And he's like, oh no, like I do a couple of lawns. He's this old guy. I do a couple of lawns around here. And I was like, oh, well, how much do you charge? He's like, I charge $50 a month. Right. And in my head, I was like, yeah, all right, let's do that. I don't have to do any of it. Perfect. So I tell my wife, and I was like, $50 a month. So we're like, okay, cool. And I just assume he's going to come once a month and mow our lawns. Right. So he's coming every week. Every week he's mowing our lawn. And then on top of that, he's taking our trash cans out, and he's doing our back and mowing our back. And he's blowing, and he's blowing, and he's weeding. And he's like, hey, do you want me to like fertilize your lawn and do all this shit, right?
More than 50 bucks worth of work.
Yeah, way more than 50 bucks worth. So we have this conversation, right? And I think this, if you take anything away from this podcast, this is a great conversation, is what is the ethical thing to do, right? You have this guy coming who's clearly old and retired. He just wants some extra money. And so do you exploit him, right? So kind of like immigrant workers, do you exploit them, right? Do you say, well, he decided on $50. He's giving me $200 of value a month, right? And that's just the way it is. Or do you make a decision and say, I'm going to pay him the value he does, or I'm going to pay him more because he does, right? And that's what every employee would want. Pay me more than what you said you're going to pay me because I'm doing such a great job, right?
Yeah.
I've been there. I've wanted that too. And so we had that conversation between my wife and I. She's from the UK, so she has a different perspective. And I said, hey, this is a good opportunity to understand what it is to be an American and start to develop this political sense of making a decision. And so we pretty much settled on we're going to pay him more, right? Now, we also had conversations with him and essentially told him like, hey, this doesn't need to be done. This can be done, to try to like cut some of it back, right? And then we pay him more. And we've done that since the second month we lived here. We made that decision as a family that if someone works hard, they should be paid fairly for the work that they do, right? And on top of that, he does such a great job. We've hired him on for 4 or 5 other projects on our house because he's super handy, right?
That's great.
So this is, you know, kind of a mindset into when you're looking to run your own business. How do you run that? Do you exploit people? Do you pay them fairly? Do you pay them above, right? Like In-N-Out's a good example of that. They've always paid their employees above what other fast food chains pay them, right? Yeah. And look at them now. They're like one of the highest like regarded and best like service fast food chains. And so these are the skill sets that I'm trying to learn now, right? Is how to condense my time, how to be more cognizant of what I'm doing, putting a lot more priority on health. And I'm doing that, and I can do that because I grind and I have all the skill sets now, for the most part, to do that. But I still challenge myself to learn, right? And I think that's the key thing is never stop learning, never stop growing, keep educating. I want to learn how to speak Spanish, which I don't. I learn how to, my wife is Indian and speaks Punjabi. I want to learn how to speak that. I'd like to have a basic understanding of coding, right? So I have these goals, and keep in mind until I bought my rifle, almost everything I ever bought was, if I couldn't make money off of it, there was no reason to buy it, right? Outside of like a television and like Guitar Hero, at some point. Right. That's how I always functioned, was if I can't make money off it. And granted, I'm trying to make money off of shooting. It's very tough though, very tough. But yeah, that's where I'm at. And there's like, I think we could have like a 5-hour conversation about the intricacies of how to frame success, how to be happy, mindset. There's all of these things that, we're not one-dimensional people. We have all of these outside influences that make us determined and make us want to succeed in life. And we tell ourselves, what does that success look like? Mm-hmm. And so there's no way to do like a podcast that says this is what success is. But I can honestly say, like, if you can feed yourself and your family. You guys can keep, the roof on, and you can get out of, which is the most critical part, not living paycheck to paycheck, right? You have to get out of that. If you're in that, you have to get out of that, and you have to get rid of your credit card debt. If you can get out of that, that's where happiness starts for me.
Oh yeah.
Right? If you can get there, that's where happiness starts.
Yeah, having no debt, that's like one of the biggest things my wife and I ever did. Like, we consolidated all of our debt a few years ago, and we paid it off. It's like, holy crap, our cars are paid off now. Like, we even paid off the loan. So it's like, all we really got is our house and her student loans that will never go away, it seems like.
Dude, I'm right there too. That's another thing about growing up in foster care is you do get a lot of your schooling paid for, but you get none of grad school paid for, zero. So grad school, I got 1 year paid for because I was a student assistant, but the other year cost me $70,000.
That's because they assume, I'm guessing they assume, oh, you've already went to college, you're probably
they don't see like higher education as, I don't know, they just don't really give it like help with that. It's very rare. So, but either way, student loans. But you're right, consolidating your debt is so huge, and working together to pay that debt off. And my goal is to have my student debt paid off in the next 5 to 10 years, have my mortgage paid off in the next 10 years. And so we'll pay it off essentially like 12 years early, I guess, something like that. And there's a lot of people out there that are going to be like, you're an idiot. That's like, that's stupid, right? You can put that money to better use. There's ways to do that.
Yeah.
But if you can have no debt, you come from a place of screw you, right? Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I don't care. I don't give a shit. Screw you. Like, it does not matter, right? You don't have debt. And that is such a strong place to be. And peace of mind, is so important, right? There's these guys, they're multimillionaires. They're like, that's a dumb way to spend your money. But the majority of people just want to not have the rigmarole of stress of living paycheck to paycheck, to having this overwhelming debt over their head.
Yeah, we joked about, my wife and I, like, man, if we had like our house was paid off, I'd just to get like health insurance and some of the basic necessities, pay like your regular gas and electric bill. I feel like a full-time job, like I've worked at Home Depot and Lowe's before, but it's like, damn, I'd probably just do that again, just drive, lift around, make $20 an hour, whatever it is, $18.
Yeah.
And, I mean, at that point, you're just enjoying it. There's no stress of like, oh my God, you got to pay this $2,000 mortgage, and we got $1,000 worth of childcare every month. Plus now gas is like $7, $6.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So it's like, that stress level would dissipate a little bit, I think.
But in like 10 years, we're going to look back at this podcast when you're super famous, and we're going to be like, $6, that was hecka cheap. It's $15 a gallon now.
I've always said that's my whole theory with gas is like, they always jack it up. So like when it's like $3, they slowly bring it up to $4, and they'll bring it back to $3. So you kind of remember, you're like, oh man, now it's cheap. And then they jack it again to $5, and then they go down to $4, and you're like, oh man, $4 is cheap. So the last high is always the new low. So when they do go back, you're like, oh yeah, $4. Like if it went back to $4 right now in California, I'd be like, oh, $4 ain't bad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right there, dude. So yeah, dude, it's life is tough. Everybody has their own obstacles that they're going over. And I like the podcast idea you had, because I think no matter who you talk to, you're going to glean something from them. And that's super critical, right? And maybe like from me, it's just like put your head down and grind and work. But, for somebody, I know that there's a lot of people that they're very happy with the life that they have. They're making right around the amount of money they need. You see this a lot in the Valley, right? They just want to live their lives. They just want to go on one vacation a year. They want to take their kid to baseball and soccer, and and that's a good life for them. And so finding whatever that means for you, that's what's really important. And I'm not there. I'm not happy. I'm 100% happy with my life, but there's still a threshold that I need to be at for me to feel like if I wasn't in foster care, this is where I would be. Exactly. So once I'm there, then I'll be like, all right, this is where I would have been if I had a clean slate, and now I'm happy with that, right? So that's good to have that internal drive. But eventually, you know, my goal is to I love coaching, so to get back into coaching would be great. To be able to afford to go out to the range every day would be pretty awesome. It's so expensive to shoot right now, man, but that would be pretty sweet. And yeah, dude. So that for me, like, that's what happiness looks like, you know. And then obviously my wife loves to travel. So being able to travel with my wife places and things like that, I mean, that's what success would look like to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the level of success for everybody's different. I mean, mine's kind of the same deal. Like I would love to just be able to go hiking whenever I want. I'd love to wake up, have some coffee on a middle of the week on a Wednesday, and I have to open up my laptop to work. You know, I can just, well, I'm going to go for a hike today at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Or I'm going to jump in a kayak and go kayaking, whatever it is, you know, just no sense of time. It is kind of where I want to be eventually, because I mean, so much of what I do every day is just time driven. It's due dates and delivery times, and it's like all I ever deal with is just time and dates and when's this going to be? How come this hasn't been done yet? It's like, man, it'd be nice to just wake up and not have to do that stuff. You know, that's my end goal, I guess. I'm slowly getting there. I'm finding ways to make time to do things like this podcast and like other things. Maybe close the laptop at 3 o'clock. I'm not going to sit around and wait for something to happen necessarily at work, and play more with my kids and stuff like that, you know, make those.
I think you find ways to, like you said, prioritize and be more effective with your time. And especially, like, I don't have any kids. I don't intend to have any kids. It's possible, but I don't intend to. But I understand this is one of the reasons I don't have kids. It's a commitment, right? I mean, you have brought a life into this world and you want to make them as successful and prepared for life as possible, right? So I think that forces you to be better. It forces you, right? Either, I mean, you could crumble and be like a loser dad who like leaves, but if you stay and you work it out, like, I think that forces you to work harder and find ways to bring success into your household, right? And I think that's really powerful. And I sometimes wonder, like, if I did have a kid, would I maybe do life differently? And can I replicate that without having kids? Right? Can I have that same sort of urgency and whatever, right? But being a parent's tough, dude. I mean, I coached for 12 years and I love coaching. I love kids, but the way that kids treat their parents is way different than how they treat their coaches, right? That's so true. You guys have it out there, dude. They're running you through the ringers all the time. They don't care what you have going on. It's crazy, right? But one of the things I wanted to say was, you know, when we're talking about like the value of time, right? So I took this position, and the first thing I said to myself is, I want to get time back, right? Like, I can't 80 to 100 hours, 60-hour weeks. It's an overwhelming amount for the little amount of money that I was making. It just didn't make sense, right? So my first year, and keep in mind, people are highly can make a lot of money in real estate and home loans, right? I'm kind of going at a much slower pace because I'm helping build a business along with doing that, right? Not my business, the brokerage. And so I take a seat back. I'm a very patient person. And, but we got our W-2s back, right? Because I started in September. So I only got a couple months of my first one. And then I got a full year. I just got it 2 weeks ago. And in my first year of working in this job, I made like 53 grand. So it's not very much, but I made about 10 grand more than I was making with scouting. And I worked 1/5 of the amount of time.
Oh, yeah.
So there were weeks where I was working 2-3 hours, right? Right now I'm working 7 days in a row, 12-hour days to get our website going, right?
Yeah.
And when we start to get more clients in, I'll work more. But I made more money than I was making, right? And it's not, like I said, like 50 grand is nothing, right? And I recognize that, but I was making more money than I was. I spent all of my earlier time paying off debt and stuff like that. So like the same thing as you, we don't have a car bill, we don't have credit card debt, and we have a mortgage and our normal lively bills, right?
Yep.
And so this is a testament to like how little money you need to live comfortably, right? Is like, you don't need $1 million, you don't need whatever, right? Like my wife and I, we both work, we both bring in money, and we find a way to be where we are. But the most important part of that was that I got, instead of working on, let's say, averaging 80 hours a week with scouting and the gym, which I'll talk about that in a second. I went down to probably an average of 25 hours a week.
Yeah.
I mean, what is that worth, right? I mean, to me, that was everything. And it gave me more time to focus on my health. It gave me more time to pick up a hobby. I was able to go back to the Freemasons and pick up where I left off with my friends. Like I was president of my Rotary Club. Like I got to do all of this stuff because I did that, right? And to me, that was so valuable. And I took a step back, because I could have made, if I took the 100 hours that I was working and pushed it into real estate, I could have made, 100, 200 grand my first year. But I took a step back and I was strategic about it. And I said, I want to help build a business, right? I want to help do that. And I value time more. So I got my time back. I'm making what money I want. And this year I'll make more money. And the next year I'll make more money. And I'm doing it that way. And to me, that's winning, right? Oh, yeah. That's winning. I get to spend a bunch of time with my dog. I get to spend a bunch of time with my wife. And I like the people that I work with. And I have flexibility, right? I can work in anywhere in California. Typically, I want to be around Sacramento because that's where I'm at. But I already talked to my broker and he's like, yeah, if you want to go to the UK for 5 weeks, go ahead. We'll find a way to make it work, right? Like my wife's going to go to Chicago pretty soon and I'll probably go with her. And it's 3 hours ahead or whatever. Yeah. And I'll just work from Chicago, right? I mean, that's the flexibility. And that's where I feel like I'm winning the most, right? It's not always just about money. And my wife has the same thing because she gets 32 days of vacation a year because the UK very much values vacation.
Oh yeah.
And
I experienced that when we went there. It was my wife and I went. It's like it's the most leisure. Like we went all over Europe. It's the most leisure place I've ever been in my life.
Yeah, they value family, they value home time, they value all of that, right? Like her dad, when he closes his laptop, that's it. Don't talk to him the rest of the day about work because that's it. He worked his hours, right? So, but we have this conversation because she's a data scientist. And right now there's this huge push in the metaverse for data scientists. So they're giving huge bonuses, $50,000 bonuses. They're paying people $500,000 to come over to their teams, right? Like Apple, Facebook, Google, all these places. But I told her, I was like, you can never go to a job that won't match your vacation, right? Exactly. It doesn't matter how much money you make. If you don't get the same amount of vacation, you won't be able to see your family. You won't be able to travel. You won't be able to do any of those things. And this is that trade-off that you start to understand when you're older, especially if you have a family, is how do I start to buy back my own time? And that might be by creating a secondary income source like you're trying to do, or becoming a manager and getting somebody working under you that can take those responsibilities, or just getting so efficient at your job that you can do an 8-hour job in 4 hours, right?
Yep, exactly. I mean, like even for me currently with my current job, that's essentially where I'm heading towards. The better I get at, the longer I'm in my industry, the quicker I'm getting at doing certain things. Or like I'm always, one of the funny things I'm always told from people are like, man, you know how to talk to customers or just people in general, like in an email, like if they're emailing me or calling me, blasting me or blasting us, like, how come we don't have this? How come we don't have that? I can cool them over really easily.
Right.
And where when I first started industry, I'd instantly panic. Like, oh crap, like I don't know how to handle this.
Right.
It's like one of those things I'm getting way more efficient at. It's like I know how to handle these situations now because I've dealt with them a lot more than I did previously, unfortunately, which kind of sucks, but it still happens. You have
That's
those
the learning curve, though. That's the learning curve.
And that's where, like when we do get new people, I tell them like, there's going to be times where you have such a bad call or an email and one of your jobs just goes straight to hell. You're going to want to like break down. You might even think about just saying, F this, I'm going to quit. I'm going to just walk out the door and go home. I was like, but like that, I can't teach you necessarily how to handle that. Everybody handles those differently, but what I can teach you is how to be prepared to kind of anticipate those things, because everybody handles feedback differently than the next person next to them. So like, anticipating it is different. Like there's been times now like where our driver calls us and he's like, oh, this is happening right now. So I'm just sitting there waiting for the customer to call me. Like, I already know it's going to happen.
Right.
I've heard it a million times. So now I know how to handle it. It's not new. Where before, when I first started, I didn't even know what this industry was. I'm like, holy crap, I don't even know what I'm talking about. And this inspector's blowing me up saying our driver's doing this or doing that. The product's wrong. It's like, that's why I always stress to these new people that we get, the new kids. Like, you just got to be able to shake it off also.
Yeah.
Which is hard to do in business in general, but
yeah, it is, because you don't ever want like anybody upset, right? Yeah. And that's like a lot of people joke that like communication degrees are like worthless degrees, right? But the funny thing is every single company has training on communication, right? Every company, because eventually they realize that learning how to listen and learning how to communicate effectively in different group settings and with different individuals that's what your business is if you're in customer service, right? Or even in your business, if communication is not flowing correctly through your organization, you lose money because of that, right? So I've always been very appreciative that I went that route. It's not originally, I was a kinesiology degree originally, but when I transitioned over to communication, I was always very appreciative of that. Is that like same way that you're kind of saying, is being able to navigate that conversation with people. And I just had to do that the other day. I pissed off this guy that owns a wholesale printing company. You pay like at market prices. And I pissed him off, and he was pretty much like, we're going to cancel your account and blah, blah, blah. And then he like threw a question. He's like, how would you respond? And I just was like super calm about it. I was like, look, I'm a customer service guy. Like, I believe in doing what's best for our clients. Like, that's how I've always functioned. And then I just kind of went backwards, and I kind of broke down what he was saying. And I kind of told him like, hey, look, this is what was communicated to me. I'm not saying that's 100% correct. What I am telling you is that's what I heard, right? And so I'm not telling you how to do your job, how to run your business or whatever it is, but this is what was communicated to me. And then we kind of worked our way back, and we both laughed it off at the end, right? But it's like, if you don't develop these skill sets, it makes your life a lot more tough. You lose business and things like that. And you really do have to develop that skill set as an entrepreneur, especially because your business is working with people, right? That's what entrepreneurs just mostly is. And so you got to learn how to be personable and let things roll off your back. And that kind of leads me, I know we're running real long on this, so I don't want to take up all your baby time, but so with the gym, I actually cut ties with the gym about 5 years in, right? That was a valuable business lesson for me, is that you're not always going to be compatible with the people that you work with. I lost money on that deal. I lost 5 years of my time on that deal. But I learned a lot of important skill sets, right? And I walked out with integrity, is really the best way to put that. And that's kind of how life is, right? Sometimes you're going to invest in certain things and it may not yield for you, but you will get something out of it, right? I have a lot of really strong business sense from that experience. And I'm not a multimillionaire like I thought I would be, which it should have been, but now I'm going to try to develop that into something new, right? And that's just what you keep doing, right? You find a way to be successful, to keep trying. And, hopefully at some point, it would be kind of cool to call myself a millionaire. I wouldn't be upset with that, I guess. That'd be all right.
As much as we joke about it, yeah, hey, I wouldn't mind.
Yeah. Well, for me, there's a big part of me that's really like, because I worked in nonprofit so long and I do all of these extra clubs, is that I really have like a strong, I really want to give back. So I will give back now, but not as much as I want. I give time, right? So they typically, in nonprofit, they say you either give time, you give money, or you give people, right? You bring other people in. Those are like the three things. And I've never had the money, so I give my time. But I'd like to be the person that can give the money, right?
Maybe
that would be yeah, that would be ideal, right? So that's kind of like, I want to help out the community. I want to help out people, and I want to do my job and keep my family healthy and happy. And I'd like to build, I guess at some point you're kind of like, I want to build some sort of empire for myself and either pass that on or make it mean something, right?
Exactly. I mean, I think the end game for myself essentially is, my dad's both my parents worked so hard to give us like a better life than what they had, especially my dad. So it's it's kind of like I feel the responsibility. He worked his ass off for so many years so I could have these certain things given to me and opportunities available. So now I got to do the same thing. So now my kids can have the next level of opportunity that I didn't even have. So now they got more. It's just a continued cycle. Hopefully, where someday if this does take off and we're like 10 years down the road and it's like, holy crap, I signed a $100 million Spotify deal.
Oh yeah.
We're set, but I think it's the ultimate goal too is, I want them to see that as well, that you got to still work for what you want, but you got to be grateful for what you've been given to at least get the ball rolling. Like looking back at it now, you don't really think about growing up, or I never did, with my parents and the things we had, and then growing up and having the struggling aspect ourselves, my wife and I, when we were really poor, barely getting by, and now getting to where we are now. It's like, and I totally respect everything my parents went through. I'm counting, rubbing two pennies together, praying for a nickel. There's definitely been those times throughout our life. It's like it's a lot harder than parents always lead on.
Yeah.
Conversation, parents have that you're oblivious to when you're a kid. So it's like, damn, totally get it now. Like even when I go home, like I tell my dad all the time, you're the hardest working person I ever have met. And in a sense, you're kind of the American dream.
Yeah.
From Mexico as a baby, growing up in the projects and owning a house and having a family. Yeah, you're not a millionaire, but you've always had, from where you started and where you are now, they're two totally different.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And the numbers were stacked against them to fail in a sense. So I think, being grateful so for the journey.
And I think that's why it's so important, like not to judge people because you don't know their journey, right? Mm-hmm. Like, 50 grand, 50, 60 grand is not a lot of money in California or really in general. But like, I fucking had to work super hard to get to that place. And now, I can charge someone $200 an hour to do a media project. I can easily make 5-10 grand off of that. And so I choose to do these sort of things to be in a position because I think that'll build for me later. But like, I just think it's so important. Like, don't worry about what other people are doing. Granted, I'm super driven to beat people. That's just always in my nature. So I do kind of still do that, but it's in that same mindset of like, we're not comparing ourselves together because we have no clue where they started, what they've gone through. Same thing for us, right? Nobody knows, right, what your life experience is. And that plays such a huge factor. And it's like, that's why I always say, like, now for me, the measurement is happiness. It's just like, at least like if you're happy, then you've done something right. You know, unless you're watching one of the murder documentaries about these serial killers are happy. Maybe they haven't, but most people.
Exactly. I know we watched some of those. It's like, man, the 80s was a crazy time. Like,
it was a crazy time, dude. It's like a serial killers left and right, dude. It's crazy.
Like, freaking every city had like 4 of them. It's like, what?
Yeah, it's wild, dude. I have a whole theory on that too. We could talk about that some other time, but yeah, man. So that's my life. That's my life condensed into 2 hours, essentially.
Yeah.
And you know, hopefully, I'm hoping, you know, you keep going with the podcast, because I do have like a huge appreciation for content developers, because I've tried it multiple times. It's really tough. But I think this kind of avenue is really good. And then it would be kind of cool to get like maybe a group of us on together at some point after you've done individual people, and just rile them all up. Just be like, talk about like something, you know, ridiculous, and get everybody's input on it. It would be funny.
That's definitely something I've thought about before. It's like, man, I would love if I can get to like an episode 50. I'm not going to say if I can, because I'm going to get to an episode 50. That's my mindset. I'm going to get to it. Like a monumentous freaking episode. That would be so cool. I've thought about that already. Like, how many people can get on a Zoom call? I've looked at it. That's why I started looking at other.
I think you can do. I just saw it. I think you do like 70 people or something.
Yeah. So I'm like,
you can almost get every single person. Do 50. Number 50, you get all 49 people to come back on.
See, that's what I'm saying.
That would be cool, actually.
Yeah, I think that'd be super cool, because then it's a good way to network too. It's like, man, who knows if somewhere in that 49 people, somebody strikes it up with somebody else, and then it's like, okay, now you got some business ideas or whatever it may be. So yeah, it'd be cool. That's the plan. Hopefully,
I'd watch it.
Yeah, hey, you might be on it. Shoot,
yeah, that would be cool.
That'd be even cooler.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope I make the cut, dude.
I know.
Like, oh, that Mac one really trended downwards. I don't know if we should bring that guy on.
And they're like, I don't know about episode 2, man.
Yeah. Exactly.
No, I'm kidding. I really appreciate you coming on and, you know, taking the
absolutely
time. So that would be awesome to have you on again, whether it's in a large group or even just like this again in the future. So
yeah, it would be cool to these are always really interesting, because it takes a lot of time to develop like a new person and their life or whatever, you know. So it would be fun to come back on and like talk about like very like specific stuff and just like get into the nitty gritty of it. It would be cool.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt even at the one with John, the first episode. I was like, man, we're doing so much BSing and catching up and reminiscing that like every reason why I wanted to bring him on originally I got thrown to the wayside.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, oh man, it's like I definitely gotta have you on next again and get into what you're actually doing, because it's far more interesting than reliving high school for 2 hours and a half probably. But
high school is amazing.
I
loved high school. I loved high school. I loved college. I love what I'm doing now. I think, like I said, it's all about perspective, right? I mean, obviously not all of it was great for me, but I can look back and say like I took full advantage of everything I possibly could, and I enjoyed it. So
I mean, exactly. Going to the military route and going to college for free, took advantage of. It's not why I joined, but it's like, hey, it's there, you know.
Yeah, you take advantage. You already take advantage of that VA loan for your home, dude.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah, that's the way to go, right there, dude.
It is.
I learned so much about VA home loans, dude, because I'm writing that website, and I have like probably like 15 pages of stuff on the VA home loans, and I'm like, I was like, dude, this is sick. Oh, that's tight. Oh, what, they get to do this?
We got hooked up pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are, you know, putting your lives on the line, so you should get like significant benefits, but it's been cool to learn more about it.
Yeah, it's funny because that's like I've been told before, like from people that are like, oh man, you're lucky, you know, you got to go to college for free. And it's like, well, I also started later also. This way, like most people go 18 to 22, 23 is probably when you graduate at the BA. It's like, man, I started college at like 23 years old. I'm already like 4 years behind everybody else essentially, because my only job experience, like actual career, was military. So it's like I had some catching up to do. It wasn't like came out the gate just guns a blazing making 50, 60, 70K a year. It's like, man, starting is almost like graduating high school at 23.
Yeah. You know what would be a cool business idea? To do like a resume template series for military, because like I personally feel that my old business partner is Marine. So I've had a lot of conversation with him about the military. And I personally feel that there's just not enough value put on what you do in the military, right? Like as your actual like working job there, the skills you learn and all of that. And I think because you're in the military, you don't really learn how to do the business part of life. And so you come out and you don't know how to like, how do you take your work experience from the military and draft it into a successful resume that would get you into a job, right? I think there's a huge market for helping the military, our vets that just innately, because they're missing skill sets that they're just not learning in the military because they're fucking saving our lives. You know what I mean? They're like fighting a war. So definitely I would consider something like that's like a nice little pivot, right? And you know the lingo, right? That's the thing. Like I couldn't do it because I don't want to spend that amount of time learning the lingo. Yeah. But you know what ranks do what, what jobs do for the most part. You can connect people in that industry, and then you're like, okay, perfect. Like if you were, this job and this rank, you learn this skill set, and this is how it translates over to a resume. This is how you use that as practical information to get into the job market.
That's a really good idea. I never thought about it.
Yeah, that's such a great idea, dude. You can have that for free. Take it. It's yours. I don't even want it. You have it. You make the millions off it.
I'm going to cut that part out of this podcast so nobody else takes it.
No, dude, it's a good. It's funny. We talk about this all the time. We have all these great ideas, but it's like, well, you only have so much freaking time, right? Like, so just double down on what you can do, and pass off the ideas to anybody else who has the time.
Hell yeah.
So
that's a good one. I like that. Mm-hmm. Never thought about it before. Because I woke up the next day and I was out of the Navy. It's like, okay, well, shit.
Yeah. And it's just nobody. The problem is that people that don't know anything about the military, they have no clue. They just think that you went and fought or you went and did nothing, right? So they have no way to connect either. So even if you had if you had a platform because there's a lot of programs that they hire military vets, right? Mm-hmm. So if you can create a platform that educates employers, right? So one, you get employers to sign on to this program, right? So now you're going to get some sort of fee for that. Then you use that to build it, to bring on vets. They come on, they get linked into jobs, and it bridges the gap of knowledge between an employer and a vet. And on the other side, you can translate what jobs are looking for, right? This is how you fit into this job because of what you've done in the military.
Damn.
That's a good idea. Take that and use that.
I am. I'm going to hold on to that one. That's really good.
Yeah. I don't know how you would do it exactly, but I think that's a fun idea.
Yeah. That's something to think about for sure. It's literally never crossed my mind before, and that till you brought it up.
Well, nobody does it either, right? That's the thing. Is what I'm saying is you find a problem and then you learn how to solve it, right? Yeah. And it's like how many people are leaving the military every single day as vets, right? Like all the time, and it's like there's services for them, right? But I mean, this would be really advantageous to be like, how do these translate over?
That's true. There's nothing like that I've come across. Like I built mine up by myself and trying to bridge that gap between what I did and what makes sense to somebody that has no clue what I did. Which is difficult. It's very difficult to do.
It's very tough, right? But that's what you do. You evaluate, and that's a lot. That's the thing. It's a lot of work, right? Because you have to evaluate every job, every rank, right? You have to have a deep understanding of that for every branch. You'd have to bring on other branch people to do that. And then once you have that, then you have to decipher what are these, because dude, the people that write like job descriptions, I swear to God, they're idiots. I'm just like, you don't know what you're saying. Stop using these $10 words for a $2 job, right? Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, that would be like such a gift, I think, to vets And shit, you could even sell it to the military and have them use it as a resource for. There was a time when we were going to partner with some military people because we were developing renewable energy, and that's a resource to military, right?
Yeah.
So I have a little bit of kind of knowledge base of that, and I know that they buy shit, right? So, I mean, if you can develop a skill set to give, or a tool to give to, like, let's say the veterans department, what is it? I totally forgot on the real estate side, but something like that, like now when you're leaving, now you have something that you can give every single person to get into the job market. And the good old Uncle Sam's going to pay you for it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So food for thought.
Oh yeah.
For use sure. It, don't use it. I don't know.
It's a good one. I'll have to think about it. It's not bad. I really do like that.
Yeah. Just develop it before I finish my business. Because if I finish my business and I have nothing else to do, I'd be like, remember that fucking thing? I already made it.
Already done.
I didn't have anything else to do, so I did that.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, all right, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
Nice catching up, and then getting a quick rundown of life since high school and a little bit before. So